Om Shri Sairam. Thank you, Jaime. Uh, sometimes because we have all moved on so much from Puttaparthi, especially I, when somebody says that you were fortunate to be in the presence of Swami for so long, it actually brings back the splendor of those days, as well as, the responsibility and the accountability that comes with it. So, but nevertheless, it's a pleasure to be here. And thank you to the organizers for giving me the time and space to share some thoughts. And more than anything else, it's a great opportunity for Swadhyay or study of Swami's great epic works, which are, Ram Kita Vahini, Gita Vahini, Bhagavad Vahini. All these are very, very sweet. And I'm taking a slightly introductory approach to the first few minutes only because we had a break due to last week's, uh, you know, uh, restructuring of the program due to Guru Purnima. And I am going to reach out to all of you on the chat to share, to engage with you so that, we make this a little bit more interactive to the extent that it's possible on a virtual media. So if you remember, in the past, we spoke about many different topics. We somehow still haven't touched on some of the well-known verses of the Gita. And, like Man Manabhav Mad Bhakto, Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru, and Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam, which are fantastic. They are the fewer well-known verses of the Gita. There are a lot of unknown verses of the Gita. And as I have been delving into the Gita. So the challenge that Swami has created for us, which is his way of making us delve deeper, he hasn't laid it out on a platter. So if you read the Gita Vahini, you will discover this secret of how Bhagwan is such a modern guru. He does not just give you the stuff. He wants you to try to correlate what he's saying with the actual verses of the Gita. And I found a fantastic correlation as his commentary proceeds. But I've had to do some sadhana to look for the corresponding verses. And when I find them, I have so much joy that I'm able to see that Swami's commentary is such a description of the few jewels that Sri Krishna laid out for Arjuna, but Swami has elaborated on that so much more. So if you remember, in the last few sessions, we spoke about karma. And I remember Shubha asked this question because it was really difficult to understand what is the difference between karma, vikarma, and akarma. And I wanted to start with that. So karma is action, ordinary action that we all do and that we are all driven to do. However, you may think that I'm not going to do any action today. It's not possible. And what is the center that drives action in all of us? It is the mind. You may sit down to meditate and you say, I'm going to not do any action. And slowly your mind will bring up from the past or from the future, which it imagines certain actions, and you are driven to act. Vikarma is the negative action that some people undertake, and sometimes even we undertake, which is driven by the three gunas, the two of them actually, the tamasic and the rajasic. Action that is based on darkness or ignorance, and action that is based on rajas or passion. And it is very rarely that we undertake action with good control of ourselves, with good inner poise. And sometimes you will find yourself being in that mood when you're acting, you're taking the right action in alignment with your dharma, but you're very peaceful and calm. And one hallmark of that situation or that scenario in which you're taking that action is that you will notice sometimes retrospectively that your breathing was very beautiful, very rhythmic, and sometimes you can put yourself in that mood conversely, and these are the tricks. So we are constantly looking for those tricks and techniques because this is the age of science. But you will realize that actually the converse is true, that when you are in tune with Swami, you will tend to act in a noble, refined, calm way. And that has the potential for what Sri Krishna describes as akarma, which is selfless action. And we spoke about how uh, Sri Krishna tells the Gopikas to go across the Yamuna and to conclude their fast, which is a ritual they undertook. They go to Durvasa. Krishna points them to Durvasa, sage Durvasa. And when they have to return to Vrindavan, they say to Lord, to sage Durvasa, how can we go? The Yamuna is in spate. And he says, here, you go to the Yamuna and tell her, request her, pray to her, saying that if the sage Durvasa has never eaten more than one mouthful of food, one morsel of food, and that too by offering it to you or to the Lord, you part and make way for us to go. And the Gopikas are very confused because they have just returned from feeding sage Durvasa a sumptuous feast. But nevertheless, not wanting to anger sage Durvasa, who's known to be, Durvasa is the angry sage, known as the angry sage. But Swami says he always used that anger to teach. And they go to the Yamuna and they say, without much belief, that if the sage Durvasa has never eaten much and has only taken a morsel full, then you part for us to go back to Vrindavan. And the Mother Yamuna parts. So that Swami has described as a great example of akarma. But for us, all of Swami's actions are actually akarma. And you know, in the Gita, one constant theme that I am coming across is the capital me. Shri Krishna says, be absorbed in me. So more than the need for us to learn about the Sanskrit words, the terminology, the chanting and the meaning, if we can get absorbed in Swami, because you and I, out of all the ages in which people are born, you and I are truly fortunate because we have seen, heard, listened and touched the avatar. Let's not let that opportunity go away before our lifespan is over. Let's bring to the front of our mind. Swami is definitely there in various parts of our mind. The mind operates at different levels. But let's bring Swami to the front and center of our mind. And virtually every action that Swami undertook came from the level beyond the body and the mind. You and me are constantly operating from the body and the mind, and that is where this framework of karma and vikarma fits. But Swami operated from beyond the body and the mind. And there are other people, other yogis, saints who did that. And their action, which is completely selfless, is what is described as akarma, or completely selfless action that is disconnected with self gain. And that is how we have to understand. So much about that, which was what we covered up till now. I'm going to talk today about the chapter 6, 7, and 8 of the Gita, which Swami has covered in his chapters in the Gita Vahini, in virtually chapter 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So chapter 6 is the Dhyana Yoga. And again, it is very beautiful. It makes you ecstatic. And I may be making it a little bit philosophical. Pardon me for that, but I don't have an option. But again, I want to remind you that no less than personalities than like Albert Einstein, Mahatma Gandhi, and many others turn to the Gita as a book of practical wisdom. So even if I have to state some of the relatively conceptual aspects of the verses, I need to do that, brothers and sisters, to do justice to the Gita. Just to be popular and to tell you stories, I cannot stay away from the value that the Gita verses and Swami's commentary, provides us. So bear with me and try to bring your mind to focus, even if it is a little bit conceptual and philosophical. So this chapter is called Dhyana Yoga. All of us are familiar with the verse, with the word dhyana, which means meditation. This is the yoga of meditation. Having covered the yoga of karma sannyas, which is action and giving up of the fruit of action and wisdom. Now Krishna is talking about uh, this beautiful verse which I have picked, which is Bhagavad Gita 6:15, where he says, Yunjam evam sadatmanam yogi nitya manasaha, which means, thus constantly keeping the mind absorbed in me, the yogi of disciplined mind attains nirvana and abides in me in supreme peace. Now, I always thought that it was the Buddha whose term nirvana, who popularized and created the term nirvana. And this is what I'm constantly seeing in the Gita, that the Gita, the Upanishads are supposed to be the essence of the Vedas. And Swami says the milk of the Upanishads is the Gita. So imagine, for people in the worldly society, householders who have a career, kids, and all the other things to do, Swami has distilled out, Sri Krishna has distilled out the essence of the Vedas twice, twofold, into the Upanishads, and because again the Upanishads became too abstruse and difficult, into the Gita. So here Sri Krishna is saying that this concept of constantly keeping the mind absorbed in me. And I think in the last session, I spoke to you about how Brother John Hislop, Sir John Hislop, brought out this very beautifully. And he said that he had asked Swami about it. How can you constantly keep the mind absorbed on me? You're, cleaning, cutting vegetables, cooking something, serving your husbands, making a PowerPoint, researching some serious stuff. How am I going to be able to keep the mind constantly absorbed on Swami? And again, see, the beauty of spirituality is that there is no point somebody else telling you the answer. And in my own life, I'm finding this after spending 30-35 years around Swami. Today, I see that when the answers arise from within, I'm much more inspired. I'm much more convinced. And that drives me to the practice of spirituality in alignment with Swami, much more than I did hitherto when it was coming from reading a book or a discourse of Swami. Now, once it is internalized, the direction, the guidance comes from within. So, how will you and I keep our mind constantly absorbed on Swami? That's a riddle. I'm throwing that out to you. I don't want a verbal answer, and nor should you look for that. But the answer, the secret lies in curbing the mind, which you can see on the left over here. So, what Swami has said, that the mind of the yoga adept, who is the yogi in Swami's mind? The yogi is one who is seeking God, who is seeking God realization. So if you and I can every morning wake up and just don't let other matters come into your mind, think that today is one more day for me to make my progress towards the goal of self-realization and God realization. Then what will happen? That constant focus will, when embedded in the mind, guide your and direct your whole activity set during the day. And further, Swami gives three ways: systematic practice, which means you will fail and rise again, but you will continue to do it; relentless inquiry. So every action that you perform, inquire, who am I during this action? What am I thinking during this action? How is my response to this need through this action going to take me one step closer to my Atmic self, to my reality as a soul and not as the body and the mind? Now, this may seem very, very philosophical, but that is the challenge that you and I have in front of us. Can you and I start thinking about every activity, every opportunity, whether in the job or in the family or during leisure, to find the secret of the path towards the inner self? And then the third element which will keep us uh, active in this path is vairagya or detachment. And vairagya or detachment, is the hallmark of Swami. Swami was so detached. And this is a secret I want to share with you. One day, Swami, one of our very senior brothers, left Swami and went away. I had just joined my 11th grade, starting off my 12th grade. And Swami came out and stood there and he was swaying like this. And you can imagine when a very senior person who's very close to Swami leaves Swami, everybody's shaken for a minute. And people then think, oh, maybe we should also pack our bags and leave Swami. And that's the other aspect of what I will conclude with today, which is the Maya or the delusion that Swami has spoken about, but which haunts us day in and day out, irrespective of whether we are close to Swami or in the world. But Swami used to say that there are two reasons why people leave me. And he said this on that day when this great person left Swami and packed his bags and baggages and went away, which to us who were kids at that time made us, ponder that, hey, should we also be packing our bags and leaving Swami? If such a great person who's in Swami's room morning, noon, and night is leaving, what is the signal to us? Swami dispelled our delusive thoughts that were arising in our young minds by giving us a beautiful piece of wisdom which dispelled all that Maya that was shaking us. Because often we do what our peers are doing, what our seniors are doing. This is a lesson I learned that day as a 12th grader, that I should never hitch my fortune, however great the person may be, on what anybody else in the Sai fold is doing. Whether it is a great person or a not great person, a person close to Swami or not, I have to derive inspiration from people, but I should never do what they are doing. And I cannot take names here, I'm so sorry. One person from the West got 17 consecutive interviews with Swami in 9 days. And on the 10th day, he left Swami and he started writing all kinds of things about Swami. And when I look back with these two incidents and what Swami told us that day, and he said, people leave me for only two reasons. The younger people leave me because they have desire. In the young mind, desire arises. The young mind cannot control that desire. And in the presence of the avatar, he doesn't know how to fulfill that desire because there is discipline that the avatar and the guru creates. So he breaks free from the so-called fold of the guru or the avatar because he wants to express that desire. And the second thing Swami said, the older people leave me because of ego. Because in the ashram, in the Sai fold, the Sai community is built in such a way that it does not give room for the expression of the individual ego. Me, the great guy, the great speaker, the great dramatist, the great, national office bearer or whatever. There is no room for this. And Swami has created a self-destruct mechanism. The moment you create for yourself such vibrations of thinking of yourself in an egoistical manner, Swami, the unmanifest Lord, breaks that, demolishes that ego. And this has stayed with me, though it happened on one fine morning, one Sunday morning, when this particular great person left the Sai fold and went into the world. This was in the year 1983. Today it's 2020. This has still remained with me. So we should not be shaken by our own minds with our troublesome enough. And let's remain with this idea that we have to keep like Swami says over here, like a steady, upright, unshaken flame. How beautifully Swami is giving us this example. Be unshaken, whether your peers and your superiors are with Swami or leave Swami, whether your mind drives you towards or away from Swami. Just watch it, witness it. And when your mind brings up all kinds of doubts about Swami, say, oh mind, you're active once again. Just do this and let it pass. And that flame within you, which starts to sway, becomes again focused and calm. And then by this continuous and relentless practice of inquiry, one day you and I will gain that absorption and then attain that state of nirvana. Nothing is going to change for you and me. The color of my skin, my height, the way I use my hands, the words that I use are not going to change. But something is going to change massively within. That is my dependence on external events. My need for appreciation, for validation from the external world will all go away. And I will become self-contained, absorbed on Swami. And in another way, Swami has described it. If you take the Sufi saints, if you take Meera, Radha, that bhakti is another form of that deep absorption. So then he goes forward in the 18th verse to say with thorough discipline, and this is what Swami is echoing here, relentless inquiry, systemic practice. And then just as a lamp in wind, so you can see over here, brothers and sisters, this lamp in a windless place, this is how Krishna has described it. And over here, Swami has said, unshaken, steady, upright flame. So you can see where we are in our study of the Gita. And then Swami says, when the mind restrained from material activities, so this is very important. In the West and in India, when you have achieved a degree of financial security, you tend to use the senses and the mind to fulfill that. But you have to be very watchful, you have to be very careful that don't use the mind to go through the senses and use the channels of money for fulfillment of the body and the mind, because you may get trapped in that. Be careful of that trap. And though you may think that it is innocent pleasure, be very careful. This money and its fulfillment and through the senses and the mind, one has to be very, very careful in that. And I saw this as a student. How many great people came to Swami, and Swami made them channelize their money by focusing on him and by giving their money to charitable causes through him. So they got a double benefit of their focus on Swami. And then what is going to happen? See, we are all goal driven. We are all objective driven. The moment you take a new job, you say, how am I going to be measured? And then your new hiring manager will say, if you achieve so many $1 million in sales, then you will get a promotion from director to senior director. That is very unfortunate. And that is exactly what Swami is asking us to forego, that thought, that concept. But nevertheless, knowing that our thoughts are in that direction, look at what Sri Krishna is saying in chapter 6:21. When you achieve that unwavering mind, you will then you will experience samadhi. So again, Swami doesn't say sama manasa, stable mind. The mind by nature cannot be stable. But when you make the mind stable, and stay with me on this, this is a very big secret. Though we think we are constantly operating through the mind, there is this entity called the buddhi, which is beyond the mind, which is, Swami, like Swami says, the Mahut who sits on the elephant, that puny little human being, holds a even more puny little metal rod, which is called the Ankush. That Ankush or little metal rod, he presses it on the neck of the elephant. And this puny little human being is able to direct that massive elephant. Who is that elephant? That elephant is the mind. The mind is a very big challenge in our lives. And congratulations to all of you who are on a Saturday morning spending time on this. But the secret of controlling that big uh, disruptive entity, which all of us are grappling with every single day, which drives us out to fulfill through the mind and senses, that can be controlled through the small ankush, that small little device that the elephant rider has. And when you do that, so these multiple processes, the big elephant of the mind controlled by the buddhi, which Swami says is the activation of your conscience. So every night when you sleep, your conscience, just before you fall asleep, brings these thoughts to you. Hey, what did I do today? I yelled at my kids. I yelled at my juniors. I didn't do well. I was unfair with him. I did this. I did that. That awakening of your past, which the mind does, don't belittle that. That is not brooding. And Swami says, he told this to Ranima, and I've said that many times. More than meditation, I want my devotees to do self-analysis. Because if you're not sensitive enough to analyze yourself, how can you achieve the bliss of divine wisdom? So with that, we will experience samadhi. I'm going to jump forward a little bit. I'll share this document with you. And now I'm going to tell you something very, very encouraging that I came across. I'll stop sharing for a minute. So, we all have this question that, okay, I might do something on the sai path, on the spiritual path, but what happens if I leave this body? I haven't achieved much. And no secret, no wonder, Arjuna the Great also had the same doubt that is it worth proceeding on these lines? So if I set out to complete a PhD and my PhD is due in year 6, but in year 4, I give up my PhD and I take up a job. Now, I don't get, clearly, it's very clear, I don't get the title, on my name, Dr. Ravi Mariwalla. Impossible. Nobody's going to give me the title of doctor. Now, does that apply to spirituality? And I was wonderstruck when I read this, and I'm going to show you that. I encourage you to go look at that. How beautiful Krishna, knowing the way our minds work, has answered that question specifically to the dot. And he says, when Arjuna asks him what happens to the unsuccessful yogis, he answers in 41-42. The unsuccessful yogis, upon death, go to the abodes of the virtuous. After dwelling there for many ages, they are again reborn in the earth plane into a family of pious and prosperous people. Can you even believe that Sri Krishna, maybe 3,500 years back, per Swami's dating of the Mahabharata war, spoke these very Sanskrit ideas in the Sanskrit language? And you can go and challenge me. You can read this because I have read it. I don't have time to bring up those verses. But I heard the chant. I read the word by word meaning of these verses. That when a spiritual aspirant passes away without achieving the full goal, without achieving the due PhD status, as we said, he's born into a family of pious and prosperous people. And else, if they have developed this passion due to long practice of yoga, they are born into a family endowed with divine wisdom. Such a birth is very difficult to achieve. And then in 44, he says, suddenly they feel drawn towards God. So at some point in your next birth, this whole investment that you made towards seeking Swami, towards seeking God, towards serving people without again, all of this is not going to go waste. So it's not comparable to your being unable to get the PhD title. Such seekers naturally rise above the ritualistic principles of the scriptures. And then he says, Krishna says, I consider the yogi to be greater than the aspirant, to be greater than the learned one who only has knowledge, to be greater than the ritualist, who is involved in puja. And then I was curious to know, so what does Sri Krishna mean by the yogi? And I saw in Swami's Gita Vahini that the yogi is, according to Swami and Sri Krishna, the one who is chasing or pursuing God realization. So I'll move forward to chapter 7. But before that, I want you to take your chat boxes and tell me, uh, uh, out of the things that I spoke now, can you tell me what is the name of the chapter 6 that we just discussed? Let's start with that and see whether, uh, you were all paying attention and whether it registered in you as to what is the name of the chapter that we were studying. Go ahead, let's see some interactivity on the chat. Okay, thank you, Sister Usha. Dhyana Yoga. Wonderful. So that is the name of the chapter, and imagine, inspire yourselves, because that is the beauty of spirituality. Imagine you and I are actually spending time on the great Sri Krishna and the great Sathya Sai avatar and what they said. So you and I are going to get the grace, believe it. You and I are going to get the grace of what uh, penance would afford a practitioner. And then I want you to, some of you, to take the step of writing out how has Krishna compared the absorbed mind. What did he compare it to? Can you take the, what is the stillness of the mind compared to in that verse that I spoke to you about? Anybody? That is important, because the next time you meditate, you need to recollect this. How has Krishna compared the stillness of the mind to what? To the flame? Okay. Can you or somebody expand on that? Is it just any ordinary flame? What are the words that he has used? And what are the words that Sri Krishna has used? Wonderful, wonderful. Unwavering flame, unwavering. And from Swami's own words, I'm putting it there. Steady, upright. The flame should not be going upright, unshaken flame. Fantastic allegory for us to recollect the next time we are meditating. And why? What is the steadiness? Because it's only when, see, if you have an impure mind, you have done unjust actions, or you've indulged in some sensual actions. And I'm not saying those are wrong. As householders, we do indulge. We love to taste good food, right? Uh, we watch television, and through that medium, some sensual ideas come to us. But at the time when you are meditating, what is it that we do to remove that layer of dirt or impurity that has got attracted to us? What is it that we do? What is it that we should do? And if you see later on in what I have for you, Swami says, I'm going to move to that section because it kind of follows uh, logically with what I'm trying to say now. Is Swami says that this mind, if you can read here, the Swami compares, this is purely from the Gita Vahini commentary. Swami compares the mind to a serpent. I didn't feel very good when I read about that. But Swami says, these are Swami's own words, so I'm unhesitatingly sharing with you. Swami says the mind has the crooked gait like the snake. You'll see the snake can never walk straight if there is something like a snake walking. The mind goes like this. That's the nature of the mind. That's the nature of the snake. And it has a tendency to bite all that comes in its way. I'm going to take a stop here. If you haven't seen the next line, can you write on the chat, what is it that we mean by this allegory that Swami is giving? Bite everything on its way. Can you take a stab at that? Can you, it's really an interesting allegory Swami is given. What does Swami mean when he says, of course he means this movement, serpentine movement. What on earth does he mean when he says the snake has a tendency to bite everything on its way? Come on, let's challenge each other to see if you can decipher that before I open that Word doc again. Any takers? What does Swami mean by the snake wanting to bite everything that it comes across on its way? Okay, spill venom. Okay, that is actually a good additional point. Let's see what Swami has to say about it. But it's very interesting. Believe me, for those of you who didn't read the next line, you will gain by understand. See this, okay, agitated mind. Anyone else? This is something you and I are doing constantly. This is self-awareness, brothers and sisters. I'm excited because when you know the answer, you'll understand something very important about okay, you're coming closer, Venkatesh ji, you're coming closer. Absorb all. Now, when I show you the Word document, you will be surprised, believe me. Because what Swami said, and this is again Swami's commentary, this is not in the verse itself. See, the snake, the mind wants to taste through the senses, that biting. So if you look here, people also seek to hold and possess all that they set their eyes on. Brothers and sisters, this is such a sobering thought. To me, see, we don't want anybody to tell negative about us. And that's the first thing that you learn when you go to a master, which is very, very difficult challenge for us to take. And I'll tell you another verse, right? I'm just jumping a little bit. Why is this challenging? Brothers, sisters, hold on to this. See, what does this challenge do to you over here? I'm sorry. Over here. Oh, I'm not able to find that. Sri Krishna says, and this is well known, out of the many, many people who seek me, 1 in a million alone will reach me. And this is what happens when I'm not able to pull that up. It's somewhere in my document. But see, and this is the Guru. Imagine, brothers and sisters, if you and I had been around Shirdi Baba, maybe some of us were. See, Shirdi Baba commonly hurled insults at people. And imagine if Shirdi Baba were to call you Shaitan. Shaitan means rascal. And in the West and now also in other Eastern countries, people are very camouflaged about the way they communicate even a negative thought about a person. But the Guru, if you and I are going to bind the Guru and constrain the Guru to also be very, very, camouflaged in his communication and indirect, you and I will never get realization. And see this, when I read this, that Swami is comparing my mind, which I associate with so much, to the crooked gait of the snake and the tendency to bite everything, meaning all sensual pleasures. We want to experience, constantly we want to experience sensual pleasure. I caught myself. I was telling my wife, Jagruti, I'm so tired of having water. Can you get me that water enhancer? And now that is innocent. I'm not saying to be so hard on yourself, but look at the mind. The mind, if you and I don't catch it, are going to be constantly finding ways to improve the taste, the sensual input, the color schemes. And now this is something you and I have to tackle individually, because in a group, it's very hard to tell people, right? Yes, we need certain level of recreational, uh, sophistication. You don't want badly painted walls. You don't want damaged cars. But how far you and I are going to take it? And why? Why are we talking about all this? Why are we willing to let Swami bang us like this? Why are we willing to let Swami discipline us like this? And I'll tell you something, why I feel qualified to tell you this? Because Swami has, I don't want to use the word butchered, but I'll just use the word banged. And as students, the more we gave ourselves up to Swami, we submitted to Swami. I have seen how Swami has used certain words to describe me personally and in public. Once he told me, he took me up to his own room in Trai Brindavan, his own chambers where he rested. And he told me to carry, that was just an excuse. He told me to carry one basket up. And you know what he did on the way? I'm just sharing this with you with great humility. For those who hear this, for those who see this later, it's with complete humility. Swami said, uh, you know, you are so impure, I cannot touch you. I was walking alongside Swami going up the staircase, and Swami's robe was touching me because it was a very big basket. Swami said in Telugu, Neelo inni impurities unnaira, I cannot touch you. And he did like this. And brothers, sisters, we have to ask ourselves this question. Where do you and I want to reach? What level of spiritual, I hate to use the word accomplishment, but for lack of a better word, because accomplishment itself is the opposite of spirituality. Just for lack of a better word, I'm using it. If you and I want to sit in the lap of Swami, and that is one incident. Another incident I'll tell you, where how Swami will teach us if you and I want to submit to him. There were hundreds of us students. We were facing the bhajan hall. We used to rush forward and sit where the doctors sat. And I was in my second year of MBA. I was very close to Swami. I would go into the interview room every single day for about 45 minutes. And at that time, Swami came down from the platform on which the bhajan hall chair used to be mounted. It was a very small platform, so it was very inconvenient for Swami to get down, he had to push the footstool back and then slowly get down, and he would tend to trip. And he came down and he called me like this. And you would shudder to get called alone into the interview room because you don't know. You're dealing with absolute divinity. And though I didn't have any sense of realization, I knew this is not an ordinary moment. And bhajans were going on loudly outside. Swami closed the interview room door, took me into the interview room. Then he said, no, it's too noisy here. Took me to the private interview room. It was less noisy there. And he said, Mari, I'm very disappointed with you. And see, it's very essential for us. I'm not taking the high pedestal here and preaching to you. I'm recollecting these instances, how much you and I need to submit to the avatar. As great as our good fortune was due to the fact that you and I got to hold the feet of that avatar, whom generations to come cannot get if they pay $50 million, $100 million. You cannot recreate the sitting at the feet of the master as I was seated that day in 1991. You cannot get it. You may cry, you may die, you may stand on your head. You cannot recreate that. But to get that, we have to submit ourselves. And I sat there and Swami said, Mari, I'm chala disappointment undi naku. He made a face worse than I'm making now. And I said, why Swami, why? Even I was not aware of consciously of my thoughts. Says the thought, these are his own words. He said the thoughts that you are having are not the thoughts that a Sai student should entertain in his mind. As you can imagine, I'm 67 born. I was, whatever, 30 or 26 odd years. And I was entertaining the thoughts of an adolescent now and then. Swami said, I'm not happy with the thoughts that you have. And he spent so much time saying, Mari, when you come to sit in the mandir, you see that you're sitting in a nice clean spot. If there is any dust, you wipe it away. Then you put your mat and then you sit. Why? Because you're wearing a white dress, white pant. And he said, just go to think how much more pure your heart should be if you are inviting me, Sathya Sai Baba, to sit in your heart. I'm not exaggerating even one word. All of these sentences, Swami said. Come to the mandir, clean the mandir space that you're sitting on, then put your mat. Swami, the avatar, the Kali Yuga avatar, had to take me into the private interview room in the middle of the bhajan and expand on his thought process so much, which is only so that I could share it with 15, 16 of you who are here today. That much purity you and I need. And how are we going to achieve that level of purity? By deeply calling out to him, oh Mother Sai, forgive me, I'm impure. I gave you so much trouble, forgive me. Swami, come, clean me up. And don't only say, Swami, come, clean me up. Clean yourselves up. Clean yourselves up, clean ourselves up. Every time you and I are filling our minds with dirt through TV serials, through bad sights, through turning our gaze to look at beautiful forms, hold yourself and remember this, what Sathya Sai said, that for make it a single seat sofa. He said, Ravi, make it a single seat sofa. Don't let other people, other thoughts. And what did he mean by that? Don't let career. And this is the other thing which leads me on. I'm just moving on before I get too emotional, but I have to cover a little bit of terrain over here. So this serpent who is trying to taste everything, all a good apple, television serials, good food, you want it more spicy, you want a better form, you want more recreation. Why are we doing this? Why is Swami warning us not to do this? Because very soon, irrespective of your age, you and I are going to be facing something very big, something much bigger than you and I. So one thing common to all of us, can you tell me, let's take to the chat window, what is common to all of us at this moment? What is common to all of us at this moment? Let me see what you have to say on your chat windows. What is so common to all of us? Jaime, you have seen the answer in the Word document that I was showing. It is, yes, we are all Sai devotees. We all love Swami. We have all gathered here to invest our time by studying the Gita. That is one thing common. The deeper level of commonality is that all of us understand English. All of us are human beings. And bigger and somewhat, some people consider it a sad truth, but that is the biggest truth. The moment we are born, the day of your birth, the day of your birth, at that point is inscribed. And Swami has described this even to primary school kids. Okay, Radu uncle is saying we all desire the spiritual path. Yes, fantastic, positive answer, uncle. But, and even Deepak Chopra has said so much about this, that the thing that is common to everybody who is born is the return date. And Swami used to joke and tell the primary school kids that, you know, if you take the railway, the train compartments, every single train compartment has in some place, it is painted, return to locomotive shed on so and so date. And don't worry whether you're old or young. Swami used to, I don't know, I have heard this countless times from Swami. Swami said, you have no idea when death will hit you, how it will hit you, where it will hit you. And I want to tell you the importance of this concept of death, how it sobers us down, right? So the difference between Gautam Buddha and us is that when Gautam Buddha saw the white hair of a man, which I am starting to get a lot, when he saw that the infirmity, the disease, and the trembling knees and people carrying a third leg, which is called the stick. Then he said, oh, and then he saw people carrying on a funeral pyre, taking a dead body to a funeral pyre. And the difference between Gautam Buddha and you and me is that all of us say, oh, he died. Oh, my neighbor, 911 they called, and my neighbor is going to the hospital. How foolish. How foolish. That is the wake-up call. And Swami says, the dying mourn the dead. The dying mourn the dead. Brothers and sisters, like it or not, accept it or not, let's stop being in denial. At least we are fortunate, Swami, and God is giving us the signs of upcoming death, the signs of upcoming departure. But you and I have to be very aware of it, very aware of it. And I'll tell you one fantastic secret which has come from within me, which I'm sharing with you, because that is the value of Sai devotees sharing with each other. Nowadays, I've started feeling the fear of certain things. And you know, I'd undertaken one course where they were teaching that you should, most of us feel different emotions, but we make those emotions a mental thing. That is a tragedy of human life. We abstract an emotion into a thought, and we do not feel the emotion as a palpable, tangible feeling. And do you know, you can read about this emotional quotient. You should feel fear as a tangible feeling in the center of your chest. And I have started feeling fear in my body, fear of different types, fear due to the possible insecurity of losing a job. And you know what has come to me internally? I have not read this in any book. The thought has started emerging in me. Hey, Ravi, if you're feeling the fear of potential loss of security due to potential loss of a job, which is an imagined thought, and it's creating this tangible feeling in your heart, what are you going to face when you're lying on the hospital bed, or after an accident, or when you're on ventilator? Ravi, what order of magnitude of fear are you going to feel when this fear arises in me due to the imagined upcoming potential loss of a job just because of unpaid mortgages and loans and all? What are you going to feel when the thought of death, which is 100% sure at that point of time in your life, whenever it happens, today or after a few years or after many years, how are you going to be able to manage that? This is a very sobering thought. And Sri Krishna says, Anta kale chamameva smarana muktva kalevaram. That is, those who relinquish the thought, the body, while remembering me at the moment of death, will come to me. There is certainly no doubt about it. And then he goes on to say, whatever one remembers upon giving the body at the time of death. Now, this is the scary part of what Sri Krishna is saying. First, he says, definitely, he strikes a positive chord. Definitely, those who remember me will come to me. Then he tones it down and says, but many of you are not going to do that. When one remembers, whatever one remembers upon death, and I'll tell you a beautiful story about Subama. All of you know Subama. She was the foster mother of Swami. Some people who were around Swami at the time say that Swami loved her more than his own mother. He had so much love and affection for Subama because she was not only his foster mother, she was also a great, great devotee. She was never in Maya. She was never trapped in Maya. And Swami one day asked her, what do you want? Subama Niko aim kavali. What do you want? Casually. Our Bhagwan, he did everything great very casually. He gave them darshan of the sun casually when they were running a race up the small hill. And 30-40 people fell down in a swoon and he had to revive them with vibhuti. Such is our Sai. He performed great cures of cancer. And people went back to the European countries and got themselves tested and felt bad. Why did we get tested when Swami said, I cured your cancer? The problem with the Sai avatar that you and I faced is that he made everything casual. And he is supremely powerful. He could do anything. He controlled himself and he gave us bearable glimpses of the divinity, the cosmic divinity was. And you know, today my kids were asking me, Papa, what are you talking about? I said, Gita Vahini. And then I told them about Vishwaroop Darshan. And my own curiosity hit me. Hey, when is Vishwaroop Darshan coming? So I'm talking to you about chapter 6, 7, 8. There is a whole chapter called Vishwaroop Darshan, Vishwaroop Yoga, which is chapter 11, which we have not yet reached. If the organizers can keep these sessions going until we reach there, it will be great. But that great Lord who could give Arjuna Vishwaroop Darshan, he promised Mother Subhama that, Em Kavali, what do you want? She said, Swami, I have heard in the scriptures that, you know, the greatest wisdom, the greatest release for the soul is when they remember their Guru when they pass away. Can you please be there with me at the moment of my death and pour water into my mouth yourself? Swami said, Parvaledu, chestanu, I will do it so casually. And for all the naysayers, for all the doubters, do you know what happened? Swami was in Madras, Chennai, when Subhama, who was ailing, passed away in Puttaparthi. Such a sad thing. If I had been Subhama, I would have broken down there in itself. And then they informed Swami in Chennai that Swami, Subhama has passed away. They didn't know about this promise. And Swami said, Parvaledu, Parvaledu. And he continued about going about his darshans, giving discourses. And then Subhama had told her relatives, dare you remove my body? And they took Subhama's body and they kept it on the veranda. This is all recorded in history. You don't even have to think whether you should believe it or not. Believe it. This is redeeming. These Leelas of Sai are truly redeeming. And then very casually, they keep sending word to Swami. Swami, her body is rotting. There are ants crawling over it. And I know some of the relatives of Swami, Kishtappa and others. I have myself seen them. They have spoken to us in the school, saying that ants were crawling, insects. The body was, excuse me, smelling. Swami is very casual, and then he comes back. And when he's coming back, he rolls down the window of his car, and everybody on the row tells him crying, Swami, Subhama chanipoindi, Swami, Subhama is dead. And said, why you are grieving? Relax. And then he goes up to Subhama's body, third day after death, and he pats her. And Subhama, lay, chudu, evaru charu, casually. Subhama, see who's come. Subhama, see who's come. That lady has been dead, medically dead for days. And then he pours water from his own hand into her mouth. And then she says, for those who were there, Swami Miro, Charu, Swami, you have come. And then she passes away. So this Lord will keep up his promise. And you know, another great soul, Mahatma Gandhi, he wanted to die taking the name of God. He, as you all know, he was shot by a person who pretended to touch his feet in 1947. When the British were hoisting the flag in New Delhi, Mahatma Gandhi thought that he had failed India due to the partition of India into India and Pakistan. So he went to some obscure part of India, and there he was giving a public talk. Somebody came up to him and they had a hidden gun, Nathuram Godse, and he shot him at point blank range. And at that time, Mahatma Gandhi, supported by his two nieces, passed away, was shot in the chest, and he passed away saying, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Ram. But do you know that many years before, when Mahatma Gandhi was in South Africa, he was protesting racism, and a British soldier had hit him at the back of his head, and he fell down unconscious. And after a whole day of being in a coma, he came out of the coma and he was crying. He was lamenting. And they said, Gandhiji, he was not called Mahatma at that time. I think this was 1902 or 3. And he said, I grieve, for despite my knowledge of the Gita, I did not chant the name of the Lord when death was threatening me. When I got hit at the back of my head with that lathi, that short stick that the policeman carried. I did not chant the name of the Lord. But brothers, sisters, see how he did not make the mistake the second time. 45 years later, when death confronted him for the second time, he was successful and he chanted the name of Hare Ram. And you know, there is proof. Sri Raman Maharishi was asked that how did Mahatma Gandhi die? Did he reach moksha? And he says, yes, he got moksha. So just like Subama, and I'll tell you one more small quick incident, just a fun thing, not a fun thing actually. I was in the hospital and Swami's own brother, Sri Janki Ramaya, was on ventilator. He had a really bad lung. He had only one lung and his only lung got infected. And, you know, at that time, I was so blessed to be one of the close students to Swami. Swami came into the urology ICU and there was nobody else there. So this task of giving the silver tumbler to Swami was bestowed on me. And I was able to give that silver tumbler to Swami. And I saw him pouring the water of life, the water of release, brothers and sisters, so to speak, into the mouth of his own blood brother, Sri Janki Ram. And I feel very blessed and humbled that I say it. But the question is, how am I preparing for my death? I saw Swami bless Sri Janki Ramaya with the water of life. I have heard about how he revived Subama, right? But anta kale chamameva smarana muktva kale varam yap pravati samad bhavam yati nastyatra sanshaya. Don't doubt that if you and I practice constantly chanting the name of Swami, whether you're old or young, then alone we can reach the Lord. So this is part of chapter 8. I forgot to introduce it. It's called Akshara Brahma Yoga. It's a fantastic yoga. The previous chapter was called Jnana Vijnana Yoga. The chapter of the yoga of knowledge and wisdom. And just to finish this, excuse me, I will just take 30 seconds more. In this chapter, in the 16th verse, Krishna gives a very important revelation, which is important for you and me. He categorizes all good and pious people. Bad people he categorizes separately in the verse 14 and 15. I'm not talking about that. But in this verse, he says, Chatur Vida Bhajanti Mam. 4 types of people seek me and yearn for me. Janaha Sukrinato Arjuna. He says, 4 types of people seek me. This word, Sukritino, is very important. Sukritino. What does it mean? Seek me. But then he says, amongst those are the distressed. The ones who are in distress. Who's a great example of distress? Draupadi. When they were derobing her, when they were insulting her, dishonoring her in a public court, Swami says the example of the distressed devotee is that. The seekers after knowledge are you and me who are trying to study the Gita. Swami calls them Jigyasu. Jigyasu. Remember that word for yourself. That's a label. That's a title Swami has given people like you and me. Jigyasu. We are the Jigyasis. We have sincere thirst for knowledge. And then there are those who are Artharthi, who have diseases and who are distressed due to disease. There are distressed due to circumstances like Draupadi, and there are distressed due to disease, right? And then finally those who are knowledgeable, who are the Jnani. So I wanted to cover that also because, brothers and sisters, this is for us to see. We don't like labels to be put on us. And to summarize, we don't like the label of Swami calling us Shaitan, but I invite Swami to call me. Swami has called me Dhunapota is the he buffalo, which means you're being dense, you're being stupid, is the best and the sweetest of the words Swami has called me. Swami has called me so many other labels, which I cannot reveal to you here. I'll tell you in private. But I invite Swami to do that. Why? Because Swami is the one, he is the alarm clock. He's going to awaken us. And why do we need that awakening? Because we are serpentine. We go in a roundabout way, we justify things, and then we want to bite everything like the serpent. We want to taste all sensual pleasures. But why have we to awaken? Why does the Guru want us to awaken? Because Anta Kale, when the last moment comes, that's our only hope to go into a better realm where we are not in politics, where we are not in economic distress, where we are not in social distress, in bodily distress. If you want to aspire for that Sathya Lok, then we have to remember God when we pass away. And I'm so sorry I have taken too much time. We probably don't have time for questions, but I also wanted to cover some of this verses and Swami's commentary. I'll stop with that, and thank you for participating. Silent.
Saram, such a nice session. Unfortunately, we are at the end of today's program. And I want to thank our guest speaker, brother Ravi Mariwalla, and also all of you for joining us today. We will continue next week, so please mark your calendars and we will see everyone next Saturday. Jai Saram.
Jai Saram.
Bye.